In 2010, The Walking Dead premiere pulled in 5.35 million viewers. By season 5, that number skyrocketed to 17.3 million. But then something changed. The final season, a mere 2.2 million viewers. The show's viewership plummeted dramatically. So what happened? Ladies and gentlemen, there's a clear rise and a series of inevitable falls that led to the mixed bag that ultimately became The Walking Dead that we know, love, and even at times hate. And in this video, we'll pinpoint the exact episodes where viewers started turning out en masse. Was it Carl's death, that dumpster fake out, or simply Walker fatigue that caused the exodus? By the end, you'll understand the factors behind this show's transformation from must-see TV to, maybe I'll catch it on streaming someday. Oh, and by the way, there is this white cylindrical button that sits pretty much right under where you're watching this video, and it says the words subscribe on it, and I have to be honest, it would mean the world if you clicked that button. It is completely free, and all it does is help grow this channel so more people could watch videos just like this one. I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's get right back into the video. Let's break down the twists and turns that shaped The Walking Dead's journey. Remember 2010? Zombies were everywhere. Movies, video games, and even romantic comedies. But TV? That was a whole different story. Nobody thought that the undead could survive on the small screen. I mean, who wants to watch rotting corpses shuffle around week after week? Turns out, actually, a lot of people. AMC was riding high on the success of Mad Men and Breaking Bad, known for taking risks and turning them into gold. And when they decided to roll the dice on a zombie show, critics were righteously skeptical. Many couldn't see how a show about The Walking Dead could keep viewers coming back for more. But AMC had a plan. They decided to premiere the pilot at Comic-Con. Picture thousands of diehard genre fans packed in one place, all hungry for the next big thing. And when that pilot dropped, it created an instant frenzy. Suddenly, everyone was talking about The Walking Dead, and the buzz was real, and it was just spreading very fast. And when the show finally hit TV screens, 5.35 million viewers tuned in for the premiere. For cable TV in 2010, that wasn't just big, that was huge. And to put that in perspective, that's more than double of what Mad Men's season premiere pulled in that same year. AMC's gamble was paying off big time. The Walking Dead didn't just bring in numbers, it brought something new to television. This wasn't your typical horror show with cheap jump scares and forgettable characters. No, not at all. The Walking Dead was using zombies as a backdrop to explore human nature. What happens to society when everything falls apart? How far would you go to protect the people you love? These are the questions that kept people coming back week after week. The show's success proved that zombies could shamble their way into weekly television. But more than that, it showed that genre TV could be mainstream. The Walking Dead wasn't just for horror fans or comic book geeks. No, it was appointment viewing for millions of people from all walks of life. It was water cooler talk. It was trending on Twitter before we even knew what trending meant. And let's talk about those zombies for a second. The Walking Dead did not skimp on gore, but it wasn't just about shock value either. The show's makeup and effects teams were creating some of the most realistic and terrifying undead ever seen on screen. Every week, viewers were treated to a masterclass in practical effects. It was gruesome, sure, but it was also art. But here's the thing about The Walking Dead's explosive debut. It was just the beginning. The show had proven it could attract an audience, but could it keep them? Could it grow? The answer, as we know, was a resounding yes. But nobody could have predicted just how big this thing would get. Remember how nobody thought zombies could work on TV? Well, by season 5, The Walking Dead was pulling in a staggering 17.3 million viewers. That's more than most network shows. And how did a show about the undead become the most alive thing on television? The Walking Dead's audience growth was nothing short of extraordinary. Season after season, more viewers tuned in, defying expectations for a show in this genre. It wasn't just outperforming other cable shows, it was giving major network heavy hitters a run for their money. And the numbers kept climbing, smashing through every barrier anyone tried to put on it. But here's the thing. It wasn't just about the gore. The zombies were cool, sure, but that's not what kept people coming back week after week. People were connecting with the characters and investing in the drama. They cared about this messed up world where survival wasn't guaranteed. Take Rick Grimes, for example. This guy starts off as your typical good cop, right? But as the show goes on, we see him change. He makes tough decisions, he crosses lines, and viewers are right there with him, asking themselves, what would I do in that situation? It's that kind of character development that turns casual viewers into fanatics. The Walking Dead didn't just give us a zombie apocalypse. It gave us a whole new society to think about. How would we rebuild? What rules would we follow? It's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night long after the credits roll in a way that a jump scare or something like that just can't achieve. And before long, The Walking Dead had become a cultural phenomenon. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing people talk about it. Water cooler conversations revolved around last night's episode. Social media was flooded with The Walking Dead memes and theories, and come Halloween, you bet there were zombies and Rick Grimes people everywhere. And don't even get me started about Talking Dead. AMC was so confident in The Walking Dead's pull that they created a whole other show just to talk about the show. And people watched it. Millions and millions of people watched it. When was the last time you saw that happen in a drama series? I mean, seriously, that just never happens. Talking Dead gave fans a place to process each shocking death, but what if those deaths weren't just about keeping us on the edge of our seats? As viewer numbers soared, so did something else, and it was about to change everything. You know what's scarier than zombies? Contract negotiations. While we were all busy freaking out over walkers, the real drama was happening behind the scenes. The Walking Dead had become a pop culture phenomenon, but with that success came complications. When a show blows up like The Walking Dead did, suddenly everyone wants a bigger piece of the pie. Actors start thinking they're irreplaceable, agents throw around words like fair market value, and the network tries to keep the show running without breaking the bank. It's a recipe for disaster, and The Walking Dead was about to serve it up. Remember Shane, Rick's best friend turned nemesis? Obviously you do, that's a joke, but Jon Bernthal knocked it out of the park with that role. But then, poof, he's gone. Dale, the moral compass of the group, Jeffrey DeMond, gave him so much depth, but nope. Zombie chow. And literally do not even get me started with Andrea. Now, I'm not saying every character death was because of contract disputes, but come on, the timing of some of these exits was definitely suspicious. Fan favorites were dropping like flies, and we were left wondering, is this really for the story, or is someone's agent playing hardball? This revolving door of characters started to mess with our heads. Just when you'd get attached to someone, bam, they're Walker food. It got to the point where you'd be afraid to like a new character because you knew they probably wouldn't last that long. At first, this willingness to kill anyone seemed like a strength. No one was safe, just like in a real apocalypse. But here's the problem. When you keep offing major characters, it's hard for the audience to stay invested. We need someone to root for, someone to follow through this mess of a world. And when you're constantly introducing new faces just to replace the ones you've killed off, it gets exhausting. The deaths of beloved characters started to feel less like meaningful narrative choices and more like shock tactics. Critics caught on, pointing out that these deaths seemed driven by contractual conflicts and the need to inject excitement into the otherwise dull writing. When your big dramatic moments start feeling hollow, you know you've got a problem. And let's talk about fan reactions for a second. Remember when Carl bit the dust? Because I do, and if you want to see a video all about that, I'm going to link it up here because I hated that death. The point is, it was a huge turning point. The episode following his death lost 2 million viewers. It showed just how emotionally invested fans were into these characters and how badly the show could mess up by mishandling their stories. And they mishandled Carl's really freaking badly because he was the ending to the comics. I'm not going to get too heated about that in this video. That's, again, go up there. But the showrunners even admitted that they sometimes used character deaths as plot devices to keep viewers interested. But here's the thing, when you do that too often, it backfires. We stopped feeling the impact of these deaths because we were always expecting them. The emotional stakes of the story, gone, reduced to atoms, like half the universe in that other big franchise. As it turns out, killing beloved characters wasn't the only way The Walking Dead was losing its soul. Remember how the show's tone seemed to shift more often than a walker's appetite? There's a reason for that, and it starts with 2 words: Frank Darabont. You know how some TV shows feel like they have a consistent vision from start to finish? Yeah, The Walking Dead is just not one of those shows. It all started when AMC decided to fire Frank Darabont, the, at the time, showrunner, right after season 1. Talk about setting the tone for instability. Darabont was the visionary who brought The Walking Dead to life. He had a clear idea of what the series should be and fought hard, I mean very hard, you should have seen some of the stuff that came out after, to maintain quality and integrity of the show, but apparently AMC had different ideas. They wanted to cut the budget and have more control over the creative direction, and just like that, the man who started it all was out the door. From that point on, The Walking Dead became a revolving door of showrunners, each bringing their own vision to the series. And you could see that on screen. Under Glenn Mazzara, the show ramped up the action and gore. Scott Gimple's tenure saw a shift towards more philosophical storytelling and character-focused episodes, and those were very controversial, and even Angela Kang tried to recapture some of the early seasons' intensity. It's enough to give you whiplash, and trust me, the fans noticed this. But the changing showrunners weren't the only problem. AMC was pulling strings behind the scenes, and not in a good way. They kept slashing the budget, forcing the creative team to do more with less. Remember those epic zombie hordes from the early seasons? They became a lot rarer as the show went on. Instead, we got more bottle episodes focused on just a few characters. Cheaper to produce, sure, but not exactly what fans tune in for. AMC's creative interference went beyond budget cuts. They'd completely overhaul storylines or force certain plot points. The showrunners were caught between telling compelling stories and keeping the network happy. This constant tug of war resulted in disjointed storytelling, with storylines being set up and then abandoned, and character development becoming just straight up inconsistent. And don't even get me started about the pacing issues. One minute, we're crawling along examining the moral implications of survival. The next, we're racing through plot points faster than a walker can shamble. It's like the show couldn't decide what it wanted to be from one season to the next. All this behind-the-scenes drama contributed to The Walking Dead's downfall in ways that weren't obvious to initial viewers. Sure, we could see changes on screen, but we didn't know the full story. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the car is your favorite TV show and the crash is happening for several years. And if behind the scenes drama was the slow motion crash, then Negan was the brick wall we slammed into at full speed. The most anticipated villain in the show's history somehow became its biggest liability. How did The Walking Dead fumble what should have been its crowning achievement? The build up to Negan's arrival was intense. The show had been teasing this guy for what felt like forever. Comic book fans were hyped, casual viewers were intrigued, and everyone was on the edge of their seats. The Walking Dead had set expectations sky high, promising the baddest of the bad, the villain to end all villains. And when he finally showed up in that season 6 finale, oh boy did he make an entrance. But here's the thing about grand entrances, they're tough to follow up on. Negan's introduction was brutal, controversial, and got everyone talking. It was a cliffhanger that left fans furious and desperate for more, but then the show fumbled the ball hard. The Savior arc, which should have been The Walking Dead's magnum opus, turned into a slog. What started as intense and thrilling quickly became repetitive and frustrating. The show fell into a predictable pattern. Rick and co. would try to fight back, Negan would show up with his bat and his grin and rinse and repeat. It's like the writers found a formula they thought worked and decided to stick with it until viewers begged for mercy. And during the Negan era, the walkers might as well have been extras. The focus shifted almost entirely to human versus human conflict, and not really in a good way. The nuanced character development we'd come to love, gone, replaced by our heroes making cartoonish villain monologues and our heroes making bafflingly stupid decisions just to keep the plot moving. The pacing became a major issue. Episodes that should have been heart-pounding became yawn-inducing. The show would spend entire episodes focusing on minor characters or side plots, killing any momentum that it had built up. This approach stretched out the story, but it added filler instead of depth. The impact on viewership was undeniable. The Walking Dead lost a staggering 3 million viewers in one season. People who had been diehard fans since the beginning were tuning out in droves, and what should have been the show's high point became the beginning of its decline. The real kicker? The show seemed to realize its mistake, but instead of course correcting, they doubled down. Negan stuck around long past his expiration date, becoming less of a terrifying villain and more of an ineffective antagonist. The writers tried to give him a redemption arc, but by then, many viewers had already checked out, and even if, like me, thought it was good, it's still undeniable that they spanned out season 7 and 8 so much that it didn't matter. Looking back, it's clear that the Negan arc marked a turning point in the show's writing quality. The tight, character-driven storytelling of earlier seasons gave way to shock value and drawn-out conflicts. The Walking Dead had always been at its best when it balanced action with thoughtful exploration of human nature in extreme circumstances, but somewhere along the way, it lost that balance. The Walking Dead was facing a crisis far greater than any zombie horde. Andrew Lincoln, the show's lead since the beginning, was ready to leave. In a series where no one's safe, could the show itself survive without its main protagonist?
No.
For 8 seasons, Andrew Lincoln had been the heart of The Walking Dead, but in 2018 he announced his departure. This wasn't just any cast change, it was a seismic shift for the entire series, and it came on the heels of another major loss. Carl Grimes, Rick's son, had already been killed off only a few episodes prior. So the writers now faced a monumental challenge. How do you continue a story when you've lost both your main character and his natural successor? It's not an easy task, and the solution they came up with was, well, let's just say it was unusual. Instead of killing Rick off, they had him airlifted away in a helicopter to an unknown location. It was a convoluted plot device that many fans felt confused by. A helicopter in the middle of a zombie apocalypse? It felt like the desperate attempt to keep the door open for Lincoln's potential return. Logic be damned. And with Rick gone, the show introduced new characters to fill the void. We got Magna and her group, the Whisperers, and we even saw Judith step into a bigger role, but these newcomers, despite their merits, couldn't quite replicate the gravitas that Rick or even Carl brought to the series, because you shouldn't have killed both of them off, but whatever, that's not the point of this video. Regardless, The Walking Dead struggled to find its footing in this new era. The tight focus on survival and moral dilemmas that defined the earlier seasons had become diluted. Complex character relationships built over the years were disrupted. The show seemed to be constantly reinventing itself, never quite sure of its new identity. Fans noticed this shift, and viewership declined sharply. People who had stuck with the show through its ups and downs were finally losing interest. It wasn't that new storylines were necessarily bad, they just lacked the emotional anchor that Rick and Carl could have provided. Losing key cast members impacts more than just the cast list. It can shake a show to its very core. Rick and Carl weren't just characters, they were the emotional center of The Walking Dead. Their journey was what kept viewers invested week after week. And when they left, they took a significant part of the show's identity with them, leaving both characters and the audience to navigate a changed landscape. And as The Walking Dead struggled to find its footing without its core characters, AMC had the brilliant idea of more zombies, because if there's one thing viewers love more than watching their favorite characters get killed off, it's seeing the same premise rehashed 5 different ways, right? Well, AMC certainly thought so. Their logic was simple. If one zombie show could capture lightning in a bottle, why not try to replicate success? And so began the zombie expansion. Fear the Walking Dead was just the beginning, and before we knew it, we had The World Beyond, we had Tales of the Walking Dead, Walking Dead Dead City, and Daryl Dixon, and The Ones Who Live. AMC seemed determined to explore every possible angle of the apocalypse. But here's the thing about zombies. They might be mindless, but viewers aren't. As AMC started pumping out these spin-offs, the main show began to feel less special. It's like when your favorite band suddenly releases 5 albums in a year. Sure, you're getting more content, but at what cost? Resources and attention were divided across multiple series. Writers who might have been working on improving the main show were now spread thin. Plot points that could have added depth to the original story were being saved for spin-offs, and The Walking Dead's universe was expanding, but was it actually improving? Fans started complaining about zombie fatigue, and understandably so. It's one thing to turn in once a week for your favorite zombie fix, but keeping track of multiple series became just overwhelming. The sheer volume of Walking Dead content was exhausted even for diehard fans like me, and probably like you too. Some spin-offs fared better than others. Fear the Walking Dead found its footing after a rocky start, even though I hated it. World Beyond felt like a teen drama set in the apocalypse, and Tales of the Walking Dead was inconsistent at best, and fans were left wondering if they needed to watch every spin-off to understand the main show's plot, or if characters would suddenly appear in different series. The franchise, just simply put, became bloated, diluting the impact of the original show. Do you remember when The Walking Dead was event television, with each new episode sparking social media debates and theories? Now, with so many shows competing for attention, that excitement was just spread thin. The special quality that made The Walking Dead great was barely recognizable. So what role did these spin-offs play in diluting the main show's appeal? They oversaturated the market, divided the fan base's attention and loyalty, and ultimately took away from the focused, character-driven storytelling about survival in an impossible world that made The Walking Dead special in the first place. As if competing with its own spin-offs wasn't enough, The Walking Dead faced an enemy far more terrifying than any zombie: budget cuts. You'd think surviving a zombie apocalypse would be the hardest part, but try surviving network penny pitching. How did these cuts change the very DNA of the show we once knew and loved? Remember those epic zombie hordes from the early seasons? The ones that made you hold your breath and wonder how Rick and the gang would possibly survive? Well, those days are just long gone. Now we're lucky if we catch a glimpse of a walker's ankle shuffling across the screen. What happened? AMC decided to tighten the purse strings, and that's what, really. As the seasons went on, The Walking Dead's budget got slashed hard. This led to a shift in the show's focus, with more episodes centered on just a few characters in limited locations. And while this approach can work for some shows, it's not exactly what you'd expect from a series about surviving a zombie apocalypse. The epic scale of the earlier seasons just disappeared. The massive set pieces, hundreds of extras in zombie makeup, and the blockbuster-worthy action sequences became a thing of the past. Instead, we got smaller scale conflicts and less impressive zombie encounters. It's like the show forgot what made it exciting in the first place. And to compensate for the lack of action, the show started relying more on dialogue. Now, don't get me wrong, good dialogue is essential for character development and storytelling, but when you're watching The Walking Dead, you're not tuning in for a deep dive into the moral implications of survival. You want to see at least some zombie action, right? Believe me, the fans noticed these changes too. The drop in production quality was hard to ignore. The intricate zombie makeups that used to make you scream, they became less detailed, more generic, and the expansive locations that made the world feel vast and dangerous were just replaced by a few of the same sets over and over again. The Walking Dead went from being this groundbreaking series that pushed the boundaries of what TV could do to, well, just another drama. Sure, there were still zombies, but they felt more like an afterthought than the driving force of the show, and it's not what longtime fans signed up for. These budget constraints didn't just affect the visuals, they impacted the storytelling too. Without the resources to film big dramatic sequences, the writers had to rely on more conflict between characters to create tension. And while that can work for a while, it starts to feel repetitive when it's all you've got. Like, how many times can you watch our heroes argue about whether to trust newcomers or fight other survivors before it gets old? Like, you'd think that surviving a zombie apocalypse would be enough to keep things interesting, but The Walking Dead just found a way to make even the end of the world feel predictable. Let's talk about how a show that once had us on the edge of our seats turned into a snooze fest that even the most diehard fans couldn't ignore. The Walking Dead storylines just became so repetitive that you could practically set your watch by them. New season, same old song and dance. Our heroes find a safe place, realize it's not safe for long after all, and fight some bad humans, and then do it all over again. It's like the writers found a formula and decided to stick with it until the wheels just fell off, And oh boy, those wheels were already wobbling. The show's predictability extended to structure of individual episodes. 15 minutes in, a character would make a stupid decision that puts everyone in danger. 30 minutes in, cue the heartfelt monologue about the nature of humanity. 45 minutes in, you guessed it, zombie attack out of nowhere. And I get it. When you've got a show, you don't want to mess with the recipe too much. But there's a difference between comfort food and eating the same exact meal every day for years. The Walking Dead crossed that line, and it kept on walking. The writers did try to shake things up. I will give them that, but more often than not, they'd fall back on the same old tropes we'd seen a million times. How many new groups of survivors can show up before it starts feeling like a post-apocalyptic version of the real world? Then came the Whisperers, and finally we had something different. People wearing zombie skin suits blended in with the walkers. It was definitely creepy, it was fresh, but it was too little too late. By the time Alpha and her crew showed up, a lot of longtime fans had already checked out. The Walking Dead wasn't must-see TV anymore. It was more like, oh yeah, I guess that's still on TV. And the show was caught in this weird limbo, trying to balance what fans expected with the need for fresh storytelling, but it's hard to surprise people when they could see the plot twists coming from a mile away. The writers seemed to be focused on just filling in the blanks with slightly different names and locations each season. And you want to know what really drove viewers away? It was the feeling that nothing mattered anymore. Characters would die, but we'd already seen so many deaths that it just lost its impact. New locations would be introduced, but we knew they'd be gone in a few episodes, and even the zombies, the whole reason for the show's existence, started to feel like an afterthought. And do you remember Negan, the big bad who was supposed to change everything? Well, his storyline just dragged on for so long that by the end, fans were begging for someone to just take a swing at him with Lucille and be done with it. And again, you gotta remember, I'm talking about the general consensus. I loved Negan, but this is objectively true. And at that, don't even get me wrong about the whole Carl got bit fiasco. Talk about throwing away years of character development for just a cheap shock. The Walking Dead's decline was a dramatic downward spiral. When AMC announced the final season, fans were left pondering, was this a mercy killing or a last-ditch effort for relevance? And more importantly, could anything salvage the legacy of a show that had lost its way so spectacularly? The final season of The Walking Dead was a challenging endeavor to say the least, and AMC's announcement of the show's conclusion elicited mixed reactions from the fans. Some felt relief, as if a long-suffering situation was finally being addressed, and others clung to hope, wondering if the series could muster one last hoorah and conclude on a high note. But The Walking Dead faced more than just its own decline in quality and viewer fatigue. The production had to contend with the unprecedented challenges of COVID-19. Filming a show about a global pandemic during an actual global pandemic added layers of complexity. The production team encountered numerous obstacles, leading to the decision to split the final season into 3 parts, which disrupted the narrative flow. The viewing numbers for the final season were a far cry from the show's heyday. At its peak, The Walking Dead commanded an audience of 17 million viewers, and in contrast, the final season struggled to attract even 2 million viewers per episode. This dramatic decrease in viewership reflected through the show's diminished cultural impact and fan engagement. AMC attempted to generate excitement by bringing back familiar faces, hoping to appeal to the fans' nostalgia. However, this strategy had limited success, as many viewers had already checked out before the series reached its conclusion. The finale failed to recapture the widespread interest and enthusiasm that once defined the show. The Walking Dead's decline raises questions about whether it could have been saved or if its downfall was inevitable. The show's title itself suggests a limited lifespan, and perhaps it had simply run its natural course. As a pop culture phenomenon, The Walking Dead became a victim of its own success, growing too large too quickly. And ultimately, the show lost its way by prioritizing shock value and prolonged conflicts over the character-driven storytelling that initially made it a standout hit. This shift in focus contributed significantly to its gradual decline and inability to maintain its once massive audience. The Walking Dead changed TV forever, opening doors for genre shows. It demonstrated that zombies could serve as a backdrop for serious drama. However, success can breed complacency, and The Walking Dead fell into this trap. The show began to stagnate, recycling storylines until even devoted fans started to lose interest. It's as if they discovered a winning formula and clung to it stubbornly, even as its effectiveness waned. And while the show's legacy continues through various spin-offs, it's unlikely that any will recapture the magic of those early seasons of the show. The Walking Dead's initial impact on television remains significant for sure, but its later decline serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of resting on one's laurels in the entertainment industry. I'd love to know your thoughts down below on what you thought about The Walking Dead, what you found to be the rise and fall of the show. And with all that out of the way, be sure to give me a follow on X and on Instagram. I post there all the time. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.